Nancy, you are way too dramatic. It's just cooking. Even if it's for 3 more people, it doesn't change the workload that much, does it? My husband said with a look that resembled watching a child throw a tantrum, and I was at my wit's end. Why do I have to take care of my sister-in-law and her kids? With a strained voice, I blurted out, "Well, I'm leaving then." My name is Nancy. I have been living a peaceful life with my husband, Joe. Joe lost his father when he was a child, and since then, he and his sister Mary were raised by their stepmom. I heard she was a very kind lady, but she passed away before Joe and I met. After that, Joe and Mary supported each other as siblings. That's why they are very close. When I met Mary before our marriage, she was in tears of joy because her brother was getting married. She was the epitome of a devoted sister, crying and saying, "My big bro finally found his happiness." Joe used to tell me he was grateful that I married him despite his complicated family situation, but the situation didn't bother me one bit. I fell in love with him because he's efficient, can handle anything, and has a strong sense of responsibility. Shortly after we got married, I found out I was pregnant. Joe was thrilled, and I couldn't wait to meet our little one. Knowing that the baby was on the way, we moved to a slightly bigger apartment, but that turned out to be a mistake. It was a sheer coincidence that we moved close to Mary's place. I didn't have a bad impression of Mary, so living near her wasn't an issue for me. However, just a few days after we moved in, while Joe and I were trying to settle in and unpack our stuff, Mary showed up. "Hello! I came here to see you, Nancy." "Oh, hi Mary." To be honest, I was taken aback that Mary had just dropped by our place. Even though we were family, isn't it common courtesy to at least call before showing up? As I pondered the difference between my common sense and hers, her kids burst from behind her and started roaming around the apartment. Mary got married way before Joe and I married each other and is the mother of twin boys. Her twins plopped themselves on the living room couch as if they owned the place and began playing video games while Mary nonchalantly started snooping around the rooms. Even though this is her brother's place, isn't it odd to just go through each room without asking? As I was feeling uneasy, Mary raised her voice, sounding impressed. "Wow, you live in a nice place. Nancy, you're a stay-at-home wife, and just with my brother's income, huh?" Yeah? "That's nice. Joe is smart and earns well. My husband is the worst. He doesn't make much money, and he's not bright. I guess it's not good to marry for looks." She sighed. She blurted out loud enough for her twins to hear, bad-mouthing her husband. It was clear that Mary and I had completely different values. Realizing the situation, I mentally put a boundary between Mary and myself, but it seems that she was quite attached to me. "Well, I'm gonna lounge on the couch a bit," she declared, and then turned on the TV without permission. As I was surprised by her behavior, as if she were in her own home, one of the twins spoke up. "I'm hungry," addressing Mary. She looked annoyed and said, "Ugh, really?" and then glanced at me. "Nancy, is there anything for the kids? They're hungry." Because Mary directed the topic to me, the child came over and repeated, "I'm hungry." I couldn't just ignore the hungry children, so I made an early lunch. Since we had leftover rice from the day before, I made some fried rice. Upon serving it, they started eating it with gusto. There were only spoons for adults in our homes, and they seemed too big for the twins, causing fried rice to spill from the corners of their mouths. Mary made no attempt to clean up the mess. While eating her own fried rice, she advised, "You're having a child too, right? You should get spoons and stuff for kids." Her tone was rather condescending. Furthermore, she remarked, "Don't you think the fried rice portion is a bit small? It wasn't enough for me. Do you have anything else?" It's just Joe and me living here. Even the leftover rice wasn't that much. I was hungry too, but I handed all the fried rice to Mary and her children. Her audacity honestly made me angry. But she is Joe's only family. If things went sour between Mary and me, the one who would be hurt is Joe. Suppressing my anger, I answered, We have instant noodles. Mary reluctantly agreed. All right, that'll do. When I made the instant noodles and handed it to her, she said, You're pregnant. You need to eat nutritious food, not instant stuff. It's bad for the baby. I genuinely wanted to kick her out of here right then and there. Just when I was getting a headache from Mary and her kids hanging around like they owned the place, I hinted at her. When are you planning to go back today? Don't you have to prepare for dinner? But Mary suggested something outrageous. Huh? I'm staying tonight. I want to see my brother. What? Since lunch was a bit of a letdown, make sure to serve a proper dinner. It's not good for the kids otherwise. Pointing at the kids who were running around in our apartment, Mary said this, and I finally protested, Sorry, but I can't let you guys stay here. We're not prepared for guests. We don't have extra bedding or toys for the kids. It will be boring for them. Oh, okay then. We'll leave after dinner. Make sure to get the bedding before we come next time. I was quite annoyed with Mary, who was acting high and mighty, but I left them behind and went out to buy dinner. Hoping Joe would ask her not to drop by unannounced, I suppressed my irritation and served the food. Joe came home while Mary and the children were eating dinner. Without surprise at her presence, Joe said, Oh, Mary, you're here, and joined us for dinner. Even after dinner, Mary and her kids lingered around for a while before finally leaving. That's when I finally told Joe about what happened today. The fact that Mary just suddenly showed up, how she threw me for a loop by demanding lunch out of the blue, and that she ordered me to buy bedding for them. After telling him everything, Joe gave a thoughtful, I see, and then responded with an answer I wasn't expecting. Well then, we need to buy it sooner rather than later. We should also consider buying one for children. Let's go buy them by car on our next day off. Wait, are you serious? Joe nodded as if it was the most natural thing in the world, leaving me feeling incredulous. Despite telling him how hard it has been with me being pregnant, why would he prioritize his sister's requests over mine? I told Joe, to be honest, I'm not thrilled with the idea of Mary showing up unexpectedly or staying over. It's a hassle and really stressful. Mary and I lost our parents, so we don't have a place to call home, and she probably sees this place like home and feels comfortable around you because you're her sister-in-law. Try to be understanding. Plus, you're going to be a mom soon, so it's good practice to care for kids. I guess you're feeling awkward because you're not close with her yet. You'll get used to it, just bear with it at first. Okay? The reason I reluctantly agreed was because I love Joe. There was a faint hope that if I could get along with Mary, maybe we could have peaceful days. On his next day off that week, he actually went to buy bedding. He also bought a lot of toys. They were obviously for the twins, but Joe laughed and said, Our kids can use them when they get older. As for me, I wondered whether it was really okay for our children to be given hand-me-down toys, but I couldn't exactly tell him to return what he had bought. Mary seemed to like our home, now with bedding and toys. Since then, she started showing up to our place nearly every week. I asked Mary once, Is your husband okay with being left alone? Doesn't he feel lonely? But Mary flippantly dismissed my concern with, He's fine. I don't care about a low-income man like him. I was trying to hint at her to go home, but she didn't get it. The only reason I couldn't directly tell her to stop coming or to leave was because I'm a timid person. I told Joe several times that Mary's overnight stays were stressful for me. At first, he listened to me seriously, but wouldn't budge from his position that I could eventually get along with Mary. Over time, Joe seemed to get annoyed with me talking ill of Mary, and he started to ignore what I was saying. The baby in my belly was growing healthily. Looking at the sonogram, I kept worrying about whether it was okay to stay with Joe. My breaking point came when I asked him, for the umpteenth time, to tell Mary not to come visit us anymore. That's impossible. Mary is apparently getting a divorce. What? A divorce? Mary always spoke ill of her husband, so I had suspected that their marital relationship wasn't good. But I hadn't heard anything about a divorce. She doesn't have any other place to stay, you know, so I thought we could live together. Why would Joe say something like that when I've been telling him how much I don't want Mary to come over? Looking at my speechless face, he turned his gaze on me as if he was looking at a petulant child.
Nancy, you're overreacting. Cooking for 3 more people isn't that much of a difference. I was at my wit's end. It was clear as day that Joe valued Mary more than he valued me. I'm leaving then. Ignoring Joe's startled, "What?" I fetched the largest suitcase from our closet. As I hurriedly packed my things, Joe was in a state of panic. "Why are you doing this?" I glared at him sharply in response to his flustered question. "You're always going to prioritize Mary over me, aren't you, Joe? It's always been like that. I thought you'd eventually say something to her, but you never did. And why am I the one who always has to do the housework like a maid? She comes over every week. She could at least help me." "Then you should have just told her that." "I didn't say anything to her because you matter to me, but I can't handle it anymore. Let's divorce." With my voice trembling with humiliation and anger, Joe was left gaping in shock. Ignoring him, I finished packing and returned to my parents' home. I explained the situation to my parents, told them I was getting a divorce, and promptly prepared the divorce papers. I filled out my section and mailed it with a letter saying, "I don't need any settlement, just the divorce." A few days later, Joe showed up at my parents' home. "It's ridiculous to divorce over something like this. What about our unborn child?" "Thankfully, my parents are healthy. I will raise the child with their help. So, Joe, please don't interfere with us anymore." "Why? Is it so wrong to care for your sibling?" "If we're married, I wanted you to consider me and our unborn child first. But in your world, Mary is always the most important. I can't be with you anymore, Joe." I coldly stated my intentions, and while Joe tried to persuade me otherwise, I did not change my mind about the divorce. In the end, a defeated Joe signed the divorce papers and left my parents' house. We were happy before Mary came to our home. The thought brought tears to my eyes as I watched Joe's shrinking figure depart. A few weeks later, I received a call from Mary. "Ah, Nancy, can you come and help me? I'm moving, but I don't have anyone to take care of my kids. Joe is so down that he's not helping at all." According to Mary, Joe had become an empty shell after our divorce. He was constantly distracted at work, made mistakes he usually wouldn't, and wasn't eating properly. Joe decided to see a doctor due to his work colleague's recommendation. He decided to take some time off, but according to Mary, he barely leaves his bedroom. So, instead of her useless brother, she asked me to help with the move. "Why should I have to help you?" "Huh? Well, you and I are sister-in-law. Plus, we got along pretty well, didn't we?" "We've never gotten along." On the other side of the phone, Mary seemed genuinely surprised, thinking that we were close. I had done my best to convey, "Go back to your place and don't come to our home," but it seems that feelings don't get across unless they're put into words. Regretting that I hoped she would understand, I laid out my feelings to Mary. "I may have married Joe, but I never intended to become your mother. I've asked you many times not to come over without calling. Why should I get along with someone who can't even respect that simple request?" "But I'm raising twins. It's hard, so it can't be helped." "If you had cooperated with your husband, wouldn't things have worked out? You found it bothersome to work with a disobedient husband and pushed everything onto me, right? I'm not a maid or anything. Do you really think I'd feel good about being treated like that? Imagine if you were in the same situation." Mary, seeming confused, countered, "But Nancy, aren't you my sister-in-law?" I sighed in response. "I divorced Joe, so you and I are complete strangers now. From now on, you and your brother should support each other and live together. We probably won't see each other again. Goodbye." After decisively ending the call, I blocked Mary's number. For a while, she continued to send me messages on WhatsApp telling me how hard her life was. Apparently, Joe spends his days crying, saying, "I wanted to see my kids," and the twins are in their mischievous phase. Mary seemed to be having a tough time taking on all the housework and parenting she had been neglecting. I was able to give birth to my baby safely, a healthy and adorable boy. For a while, I planned to rely on my parents, but once my child gets into daycare, I plan to go back to work. As a single mother, I was determined to raise him well. I will pour all my love into my son to make sure he never feels lonely without a father. I'll make sure you're happy.
Holding my finger with his tiny hand, he made me smile softly.